back to the Pursuit podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about recruiters. I know, all of you just cringed. But we're going to be talking about how you, as an incredibly talented person, can work with recruiters and try and get the most out of them, and actually go ahead and try and tell who you might be able to trust and who you can't. I'm here today with
Hannah Mitchell from Technical Team Solutions.
And you are a recruiter.
I am. I feel like I want to apologise, but I'm okay about it. But I am. I'm a recruiter, 11 years experience.
Fantastic. So recruitment has kind of a little bit of a bad reputation in technology.
Yeah.
What would you advise people to do? So what are your tips and tricks for looking for a recruiter who's not terrible?
Okay. So first thing I would do is, if you're okay with asking around, I'd always ask for recommendations. So ask people who you work with, managers, whoever, people who you kind of regard quite highly in the industry, who they've worked with before and who they've had good experiences with. If it's a bit awkward and you don't want people to know that you're looking, which I totally understand, one thing I'd advise is to look at who's getting involved in the tech community, who's supporting events, who's running events. It just shows that they've got a little bit something more to them rather than just looking at CVs and firing them out.
And that's something recruiters can do to sort of add value back to the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think maybe you run a local event out here.
Yeah, I run a Fusion Meetup, which has been going for about 3 years now. Yeah.
That's ages.
3 years, Birmingham based, and we've grown from probably about 30 attendees to about 130.
So when you're dealing with a new candidate, when you've got somebody coming in, how would you recommend they get in touch with you for the first time? Sort of send you a CV?
I'd always advise people to get in touch first. Give me a call. Email's great, but as emails get flooded with so many other junk emails and everything else, sometimes it can get lost. So I'd make a phone call. Another thing that I would advise to do, have a chat, tell the recruiter exactly what you're looking for, what your current situation is. You don't have to be actively looking. So if you just want a hand and you want to find out about the current market, what it's like, are you getting paid the right salary, things like that, call us up, have a chat, and then I'd always arrange having a face-to-face afterwards.
That's you've made a couple fantastic points I want to address, and one of them is the face-to-face. Just getting a relationship with a single recruiter and having them sort of looking out for you instead of just passing a CV on to a specific role is fantastic.
Yeah.
You also mentioned getting involved with a recruiter, having a chat, and one of the cool things which folks may or may not know, it's fair to say every recruiter will buy you a cup of coffee, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably a cake as well.
I was going to say you could push it to cake. So sitting down with a recruiter, having a piece of cake, nice cake ideally, having a coffee and having a chat, I really recommend it for folks who've been in their jobs for a couple of years to check and see what their market value is right now. Generally speaking, employers don't do a fantastic job of auditing team salaries and making sure that you're being brought up to market value. Go and have a chat with a recruiter, even go and do a couple interviews. You could tell yourself, oh, I'm not going to take a new job, I love a new job. But that day when somebody offers you 50% more, it's a fantastic day, even if you turn it down.
Yeah, absolutely. It works. We've seen it work for so many people, and this is at all levels. So people might have joined a company as maybe a sort of apprentice, worked into a junior developer level. They've been at that company for 4 years and they're still at a junior developer level. The market rate wouldn't necessarily put that person as a junior. So when they kind of step outside and have a little look around and start speaking to people, people have had, quite substantial pay rises. And then they've also got exposure to some really, really new, awesome tech, which is what everyone wants.
This is the kind of predatory thing I want from recruiters, like, hey, come here, let's get you paid appropriately.
It works. Do it.
So with recruitment, are there any sort of tips and tricks? One thing I do is, and I know this is not something you would do, but I always PDF my CV, my resume, before passing it along, just because I found less noble, less reputable recruiters will often edit my resume to add extra skills in that don't really exist.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jess. That's a really, really good idea. PDFing CVs is probably the first thing that you should do when you send a CV out. The recruiter, a more noble recruiter, may advise you to make some changes if there's spelling mistakes or if you've missed out some really, really good things out of your CV that should be in there. But I'd definitely PDF in the first instance because it works better and it saves your back when you go into interview.
That, and I've seen copies of my resume that I've put out there appear on job sites where I'm like, don't list me as a candidate. I don't like that. Yeah,
it happens, and it's so awkward. It's awkward for everyone involved, to be honest. We've seen people whose CVs have been put on job boards, people whose CVs have been submitted to roles and they haven't actually ever heard of the role or the company or position. So one of the key things that I'm sure we'll sort of cross over today is having an honest, open relationship, really good communication with your recruiter and vice versa, really.
And I think that's a really interesting way to look at it, is like having a relationship with one or maybe two. sorry, I've got little brand loyalty in my heart. Having a meaningful relationship with one or two recruiters after you've shopped around and found someone you can trust can add a lot of value.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of sitting here 11 years down the line for recruiting for tech professionals. And a lot of the people that I've worked with as candidates previously are actually now really, really good friends of mine. So I kind of like to tell them when there's really new cool jobs that are on the market, they'll kind of pass me, recommendations. They'll come back to me if they start looking for work. So it works really well. If we're nice to candidates and they're nice back to us, then everyone wins.
And I think that's difficult because a lot of times in recruitment, at least from the outside, you can correct me, it seems like a lot of the way recruitment houses work is a lot like realtors, where there's that very quick boom, 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 fill and turnover.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, unfortunately, when you join as a recruiter, new to the industry, a lot of the training programs that the larger recruitment companies will put you on, it's more quantity focused than quality. So it's about hitting KPIs. It's about making number of phone calls every day. I'm sure the guys and girls, whoever listening to this, has probably had a day when they've been bombarded with phone calls. Their CV's been sent to people that they didn't ask for it to be sent to. So there's just a lot of bad practice in the industry that unfortunately it's hard to break out of.
No, it's fantastic to be spotlighting some of the things to look out for and some of the things that aren't necessarily in the best interest of candidates.
Yeah, okay. I think if your recruiter is reluctant to have in-depth chats with you, meet for coffee and cake, because cake's awesome. If you're not getting that kind of open communication with them, there's got to be some alarm bells there, because one thing that I always advise anyone who's looking for a new role is you should have a really, really good idea in terms of exactly what you want, in terms of tech that you want to use, sort of company that you want to get into, the environment that you want. And people want very different things, and your recruiter has to know that. Now, if you're not speaking to that recruiter, how are they possibly going to know what you're after, what you want? So it becomes a kind of, for them, I suppose, a mass marketing exercise. And that's one thing I'd steer clear from. Also, as well, when you speak to a recruiter, one thing I'd say is that you want that person to have a handful of companies in mind that they know use your skill set, that they know tick your boxes in terms of what you want, size of company, sector, so you can start the conversation from there. A recruiter that's in touch with the industry and the local area should have at least just a handful of companies to throw at that person in the first instance.
So this sounds very, very different than a lot of people may imagine a process with a recruiter. I think for a lot of recruiters and for a lot of listeners, the process is imagined as I give my CV for this specific role, and that's sort of the end of the relationship.
Yeah.
But you're detailing an interaction where it's really focused around the recruiter being a mediator between existing relationships?
Yeah, I'd definitely say so. I suppose just using Fusion as an example, we've now pulled in, multiple different companies around Birmingham, which is great. There's so many different people there who are not actively looking for jobs, but they always say, if you get this really awesome project or someone's using this really cool skill, can you just let me know? So it's kind of like being that sort of, mediator, that person in the middle to make the introduction. And it's so much more comfortable than just getting a CV and firing it out, because you can talk about that person because you know them. You spoke to this candidate, you know their current situation, you know why they want to leave. But on the other hand, you can speak to the candidate about this company because you're like, I know these guys, they do this, they're looking at this particular skill, they're growing in this particular way. So that's why I suppose getting to know both parties, whether you're a hirer or looking to be hired, is crucial from a recruiter's point of view.
So what kinds of things would you recommend folks look for? So if they come into an office or if they have a phone call, what are some great signs that this might be a recruiter to work with?
I suppose you want to make sure that that person is kind of letting you do a little bit more of the talking than them. And the only reason I say that, I know I'm sitting here talking on a podcast with you, Jess, but recruiters do like to talk a lot.
Humans like to talk a lot. It's a people thing.
Really, you want to see them, let you do all the talking, tell them all about you. So you want to make sure that they're getting a really good idea of who you are and what you're all about. People should be making time. I mean, we don't have a kind of walk-in policy to our office. Like, people are like, oh, hey, I'm kind of looking for a job and blah, blah, blah. If it happened, it would be absolutely fine. But most people tend to kind of make the phone calls first. You want someone to kind of make time for you straight away, get some quick facts from you and a rough idea in terms of what you're all about, what you're looking for. And, I suppose talk to you about the industry, talk to you about the community. Oh, I was talking to this person 2 weeks ago. They're doing a really cool project. So it's not a kind of interview. It becomes more of a conversation with someone.
So a conversation over a sales pitch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a conversation where the recruiter demonstrates some knowledge of both the local market and the local tech community.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So with candidates coming in, with talented people coming and saying, hi, I want to have a conversation, what kinds of things can they do when they approach you? Or what kinds of things can they do on their resume or their CV? What kinds of things can they do in interviews? What kinds of things can they do on feedback that lets them sort of get the most out of a recruitment relationship?
Okay. So in the first instance, have a good idea about what you want. So what job do you really want to go for? Is there a company that you've seen that you're like, they look really cool? If so, tell your recruiter, because chances are the recruiter, if they're well connected enough, they'll probably know someone who works at the company. They'll probably work with the company. So it might save a whole lot of searching anyway. In terms of your CV, whether you're meeting them face to face or whether it's initial chat over the phone, always send them or bring a copy of your CV to the meeting. So let the recruiter have a look over formatting, where you've put your skills, how detailed you've talked about your projects. These people have looked at CVs for years and years. So they are a necessary evil, maybe, in that way. But they'll always be able to
get like a free mini CV workshop out of it.
Yeah,
coffee, cake, CV workshop.
Exactly.
I'm promising a lot of things from recruiters.
It works though, it really, really does. We've had people who've come to us who are great technologists, they're absolutely awesome, but maybe the CV writing skills could do with a little sharpening. So I'd always bring that with you to meeting the recruiter. Now, if we go into more of the kind of like interview CV submission stage, one thing I would say is you attending interviews, make sure that you call your recruiter and you give them full detailed feedback about everything that happened in that particular interview, what you really liked about it, what you really didn't like about it. It's very important to the candidate to have interview feedback, but they also must remember it's really important for the client to have the candidate's feedback. So make sure that you call the recruiter, you give them details about how you got on during the interview, what you loved about the role, what you were a little bit unsure of, if you have any questions, and most importantly, reservations are really, really important. More times than not, the recruiter can take that information back to the hiring manager, and a lot of the times the reservations are actually ironed out because it's just a small section that maybe wasn't covered or didn't go into a lot of detail in the interview. So that would be one of the key things focusing on interviews, I suppose.
And it's a fantastic way and it feels fantastic to give a company who's sometimes they don't do a fantastic interview. Sometimes you get there and they want you to put code on a whiteboard. Giving feedback doesn't just feel amazing, like I'm not going to work for these people, never, or much gentler feedback. But it also gives employers a heads up that maybe the whiteboards are dead.
Yeah.
For me personally, and I think for a lot of people in the industry, there's the understanding that recruiters have to get paid. But because of the high volume turnover for a lot of recruiters, it tends to feel a little bit skeezy. Can you talk a little bit about how and when recruiters get paid, what they get paid for, and what kinds of things a good recruiter would sort of do in that kind of ecosystem?
Okay. Everyone thinks recruiters are money-grabbing assholes, which is totally fine, and it's a very fair judgment to have. One piece of advice that I'd give in terms of what the recruiter's getting paid, kind of having that thing hanging over your head, am I being done over in terms of whatever? So on the permanent side of things, it's always very, very straightforward. The recruiter has a fee that's agreed with the hiring manager that normally is a percentage of the salary that's offered to the candidate.
So for perm roles, your recruiters really got your best interest at heart with the salary negotiation.
Yes.
So you can sort of work together. Oh, quite nice.
Absolutely. So from a recruiter's point of view, if it's a brand new company that we've never worked with before, chances are we're probably going against maybe 7 other agencies to try and get this one particular round of recruitment. So we have to make sure that we are offering the best rate. So we're already kind of in like a pitching war with other recruiters to start off with anyway. But in terms of the relationship side, the permanent placement is absolutely key because we want to place someone really great. We want that person to be really happy and develop into potentially a hiring manager, which would be awesome for us.
Very convenient.
Very convenient. And, at the same time, it's repeat business for us. So it's in our best interest there to have a really great relationship and also a really perfect process from start to finish. It's a little bit different on the contract side, as I'm sure you can probably imagine. One of the things that we've got on our website, and we've worked this way since Technical Team Solutions started, the contract side, we work to transparent feeing. And what that means is if a client has approached a recruiter to say, I'm looking for a PHP developer for 6 months, for example, and we have a budget of £500 a day, more times than not, the contractor will never actually be aware of what's actually available in terms of the budget. So you've got to be really, really careful in terms of knowing and understanding exactly what the recruiter is charging to make sure that you guys don't get done over. Because at the end of the day, you're the ones that are going in, you're doing the work, and we're not.
But good recruitment is work too. You all deserve to get paid for it.
Yeah, yay, thanks, Jess. I obviously totally agree with that.
But having clearer understanding of, in a permanent role, your recruiter really has your best interest, should really have your best interest at heart. They want you to get paid, so they'll get paid. Whereas as a contract role, the recruiter's taking a piece of what's been budgeted.
Yeah.
And being able to really contextualize that within what you're likely to get at the end of the day is going to be really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had some awful experiences where, contractors have found out, this has not been via us, but contractors have found out that they were being paid about $220 a day and the recruiter was making about £200 a day. I
would set fires.
Yeah. Which is, that is worst case scenario. And that's the worst one that I've ever, for the recruiter to be getting paid pretty much exactly how much the contractor is getting paid is complete daylight robbery and, totally awful situation. So what I would do is, as a contractor, or if you're thinking about going into contracting, have an idea of your day rate that you want to achieve in mind. Speak to the recruiter, your chosen recruiter or recruiters, and I'd ask about their if they do contract transparent fees. So what Technical Team Solutions do is we tell our contractors exactly what we're making from the contract. We tell our clients exactly what we're taking from their budget. So the client knows that in actual fact, they're getting the best for their money. From a recruiter's point of view, looking at long-term relationships, looking at repeat business, it does work in our best interest to be able to tell the client, yeah, we are taking this amount, but we've used the majority of your budget and we have now got you the best person that you can possibly get for that money.
And that's a fantastic point. So if a company's going through a recruiter for a contracting role, they may never know what you as a contractor is getting paid.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is a reasonable delta? So if it's a £500 or a $500 a day budget, what do you think sort of an appropriate or acceptable range that a recruiter would take out of that?
It's really, really hard to say because from a larger company's point of view, that recruiter would not take home all that money. So say, for example, if they did take home £200 a day, that money would not be going into their back pocket. It would go to the directors, it would get split down and divided and paid in commission. For us, we charge £50 a day. And that's
Yeah.
Thanks, Jess.
Okay.
After that was a look of approval.
I was about to fuss at you to get paid more because I'd love to fuss at people to get paid more, but I'm not sure that's in my best interest for a local recruitment team.
We do charge £50 a day, and the only reason that we charge more is if it is a really, really, really awkward role and the hiring manager has picked out a fantastic skill, but a skill that probably you can't find in Birmingham or a local area. We do increase our charge slightly, only because it actually takes a lot more work. I know people think that we just sit on job boards and just scrape CVs, but in terms of finding people, a lot more goes into it, especially when you get into kind of like more of a headhunting zone and you've got to start trying to kind of entice people out of contract.
With those coffees and that cake.
Exactly. It's an expensive game with all those coffees and cakes. So, we do increase it ever so slightly. I can't talk on behalf of these bigger companies, but I just always advise any contractor, just ask them and just kind of find out. And, sometimes it comes up in interview anyway. So the people who are being a little bit shifty, they always get found out.
Fantastic. I love the idea that there's truth and justice in the world.
Thanks, Jess. Me too.
Sometimes. Do you have any advice for companies? So I know we're mostly talking about talent and talented people out there in the world and how they can get the most out of recruiters. Is there something you wish you could tell companies working with recruiters?
There's so much. Where's my list? Okay. My best relationships with companies have come from people who I have spent a lot of time with, and that's not over the phone, hounding them. This is actually speaking to them face to face, going for drinks with them, meeting the team and getting to know the team. So there's more that you can do in terms of supporting a company and helping them support you in your, the task of going to find that awesome person to work with them. So first instance, I'd say, again, make the phone call, it's fine. I'd always advise companies to get the recruiter in, and not in like a kind of corporate, let's all sit around a table sort of way. In terms of like, show them around the office, let them meet Bob, and that would be great. And then, take them out for a beer with the team at lunchtime. And the reason why that is so important is that job specs are great. They're a really, really, really good tool to use. And I always recommend everyone have a job spec ready, please, before you start hiring, because we're not mind readers. But from spending time with a company, from a recruiter's point of view, you get so much more information that is not on a job spec. So if you are hiring for a PHP developer, chances are there's probably going to be 6 or 7 other companies within the region who are also hiring for a PHP developer at the same level. So you want to make sure that you're using your recruiter as your salesperson. Get out there, start selling your company, shout about how awesome your team is because they went for beers or they did games night or they love karaoke, whatever it might be, because it just helps give you that edge over other companies.
So this is a little bit even more than just building relationships on both sides. It sounds like being a recruiter who's really concerned about employers and concerned about talent is a lot like being a matchmaker.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I wouldn't go as far as like Cilla Black, Blind Date-esque, but in terms of kind of, understanding that environment, thinking about the people that, the candidates that are looking, trying to find that perfect match in terms of what they do and what they're all about is absolutely ideal. So have the recruiter in the office, give them half a day there. I'd always advise to try and get them to sit with your team, maybe watch some paired programming in action, chat to the people who are actually working on the team so you find out more about them. That's also really, really useful because it just gives the recruiter a little bit more to talk to a potential candidate about.
That's fantastic. So having a really clear idea of how a team works, what they want, the individual people on the team, gives you the chance to take the relationships you have and put them together better.
Definitely.
I think a lot of people, when they're job hunting, forget about the amount of time you spend at work and amount of time you spend with these people. So I really love the idea of having a trustworthy recruiter who can help you sort of put together those relationships for a less miserable result.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd probably go as far as advising the hiring manager to incorporate more of like a fun social element to an interview. So I know that you have to do technical tests, you have to do like programming or whatever you decide to do during the interview process. You have to meet certain people. But if you switch an element of what we're going to do is we're going to do your interview and then we're going to take you for lunch afterwards with a few of the like a few people from the team, that person will then walk away kind of feeling like, oh, I've met a few people, I know what they're like, I've had my interview. So they get a nice, more wholesome sense of what the company's all about. And you'll find that they actually go away and they'll start talking about it to other recruiters. So they'll be like, oh, I've had such a great day. I know it was an interview, but I met these really, really great people and they know the same kind of people that I know. So stuff like that works as well.
Is there any sort of message you'd like to put out there for recruiters who are not doing a fantastic job? So the recruiters we've been sort of gently side-eyeing this whole time with the whole like, oh, you got to PDF your CV because, you know.
Such a great question. The one thing that frustrates me is that recruiters need to please see potential candidates as people, not pieces of paper. These are people who have lives. These are people who want to progress just as much as you do in your position. These are people that want to get the best out of their career. These are people that want to learn. So please don't use their CV and fire them out to 500 people across one particular region, because it makes that CV look a bit cheap and nasty, because chances are that this person might have seen it several other times from another recruiter who's doing the same exercise. Spend time getting to know that person, understand what they want, listen to them, give them ideas, give them suggestions, advise them. You need to take this person, not as a CV, as an individual, to try and create them a really awesome career and put them in a great position to start that.
I love that your advice for recruiters is be better at humans. Hannah, it's been fantastic talking with you and fantastic having a look at how to work with recruiters and how to find recruiters who are a little bit less terrible. Actually, potentially wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Jess.